Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. I am lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel. CJ Vogel is always my man inside the know when it comes to recruiting and all things Longhorn football. So we appreciate him coming on. We also will get to a little bit later on. We'll get to some of your chats, some of your questions. If you got super chats, something you really want us to interrupt the show with, do it at any time. Just throw it out there at any time. But we'll get to your questions, I promise you. So shoot them out there right now. Questions about any and everything, all Texas football. My man CJ is going to give you a recruiting update here early on. Then we're going to hit some of the big topics. Obviously, a lot of spring practice news, notes, and nuggets. Go over to OwenTexasFootball.com. That's OwenTexasFootball.com. And there you can get some of the great nuggets of my man CJ, Bobby Burton, Jerry Hamilton already put up there for you. So go check that out. All right, CJ, how you doing, brother? On Hump Day edition of the On Texas Football live stream.
Hey, we're good. 17 days away from spring game. A lot of visitors coming to campus this weekend. I mean, a lot of excitement in Austin at the moment, Rod. I'm sure you're feeling it just like I am. You know, it's nice having football all the way back, and we kind of get to talk about, the little bit of fun that spring football brings to the table. And, of course, recruiting is a big part of that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. That's exactly what we'll start with. But Sark spoke to the media after the practice yesterday, so we'll get to some of those, some of the pieces, not some of the audio, but at least some of the comments that my man Sark said yesterday. I thought they were really, really interesting. All right, let's start, CJ, with some recruiting news, notes, and nuggets. Whatever you got, I'm sure the people are ready to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it starts out of Waxahachie today. There's a number of top Texas prospects out there. Our man Jerry Hamilton from On Texas Football was actually out there, in person, getting a look at some of these guys as, they get going into their track season. Obviously, the Texas Relays was a week ago. Now, however, you get a chance to see some of these guys in their district meets leading up to what could be another return down to Austin for the state UIL championships down here in Austin once again. So the number one thing we talked about whenever Jerry and I were off of camera were, hey, he got to see Jordan Coleman in person. And he also got to watch Elijah Barnes and DeCorian Moore run against one another in the 100-meter dash today. That was a really impressive run. If you have not seen it yet, Jerry tweeted out the video earlier today. How about this, Rod? A 10.4 for DeCorian Moore. Quite the impressive time. I think we knew that 5-star had some speed. 10.4 is a little different extra speed. That's kind of in your Isaiah Bond, Xavier Worthy territory. Xavier Worthy probably a little bit quicker than that, but that equates to probably a 4.3 at the moment for those trying to do the math between your 100-meter dashes and your 40-yard dashes. So really impressive stuff. On top of that, and what might be even more impressive, if you can even mention that, Elijah Barnes, 10.96 as a middle linebacker prospect, coming in around 4th place in his heat in the 100-meter. So really impressive stuff out of that group right there. The other thing I wanted to mention is Jackson Blackwell, 2025 defensive lineman out of Lorena, will be making a midweek visit to Texas April 11th next week. So Kenny Baker getting another piece of the puzzle potentially on campus to check out the school, kind of get acquainted a little bit more with the facilities, the university, and everything that goes into recruiting visits as well. So a little bit of a recruiting update there. And, of course, the big weekend coming April 6th is only a few sleeps away. Over 30 prospects on campus that we expect, with a number of guys coming in, that we may not know. Some surprises in the fold as well. So a lot to like moving forward.
Yeah, man, I'm still thinking about that 10.4 legit track time you talked about there. That is blazing type speed, and that's what Sark wants, especially at the receiver position more and more. And I think Xavier Worthy really did. I mean, when he did set the record at the NFL Combine, now I think it's going to get even more speed demons to want to play in Sark's offense. I think they got to find a home there. They believe that, Sark covets that. It seems like more and more we're starting to see the type of receiver that Sark likes in that offense. Okay, let's get to we'll get to some of the questions. I see they're already popping up, so keep them coming. We appreciate that. I want to get to some of the spring practice notes and nuggets. I won't give them all to you. Go to ontexasfootball.com. Bobby Burton did a great job. Posted some of those up there for you. You can go check them out. But a couple of these that caught my eye. Trey Wisner once again is getting a little bit more love, more and more. Seems like people are talking about Trey Wisner. And one of the notes here is that Trey Wisner, he has two speeds. And it's either sitting, doing nothing, probably helmet off on one knee, or it is full throttle, full steam ahead. And Sark kind of likes that about him. Sark remarked about that yesterday, that he likes how hard he works. And he's one of those guys, Sark talks about the thermometer and the thermostat. Thermostat sets, all right, the temperature. The thermostat reacts to the temperature. Thermometer reacts to the temperature. He's one of those guys that's a thermostat guy, I think, in Sark's mind. And right now he's getting a lot of love behind the scenes. I think the running backs are getting a lot of love. There was also a nice compliment about the running backs in here because CJ Baxter seems to be separating. Now they're putting on the pads. I think now you're going to start to hear about some of these young guys who even naturally separate because you're starting to add the physicality element to it. And now some of the other guys are going to fade because they're more finesse players, and the guys who can have that finesse but also combine it with the physicality and still be able to hit their stride, still be able to achieve at a high level. I think those are the guys now Sark is looking at. I think, the running back position overall, I think you got a lot of guys in that room that are going to stand out in that way.
Yeah, and it brings the tough conversation of how to get guys on the field. Of course, we saw this conversation, or at least we're seeing it now with the wide receiving room, is when you have that many talented people, how do you get them to rock? Because there's only one football, and you're going to have to put the best out there. So that'll be – I don't want to call it a fun problem, but it's a great issue to have if you're Steve Sarkisian, knowing that your cupboard is always going to be stacked and there's always going to be talent in those rooms that require difference makers and game changers at the running back and wide receiving spots. So right now, whenever I look at that running back room, of course, CJ Baxter is my number one guy. And then I see Jaden Blue, who's also been mentioned as a guy who's put on good weight from basically the waist up and is becoming a more physical runner. That's not necessarily the strength of his game, but if you can prove to run between the tackles, that gives you a little bit more leash when it comes to being on the field and providing what you can to the Texas offense. So for Jaden Blue to hear that about him, really encouraging at the moment. That's a good 1-2 punch. Now the question is, who's your number three? Because you're going to have to use a third back at times this year. You always do. Running backs, they get banged up. They get injured. It happens. It's one of the most physically demanding positions on the entire field. So who's your number three? Right now, I think you got four guys vying for that position. Is it a Savion Red slimming down, kind of creating more of a niche role for himself? Is it Trey Wisner, who we've continued to hear really great things about so far this offseason? And then, of course, the two freshman running backs. And with these scrimmages starting to come up each Saturday leading to the spring game, Rod, you can talk about it your own self. How big is it to kind of put out good tape in these live scrimmage situations in the spring so that you can get some momentum on your side going into the fall and into summer conditioning? These three scrimmages that you'll have coming up, to me, for these two running backs, huge.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that too. That's a great point. And for the confidence of these guys, right, going into the offseason and heading into fall camp, you want the confidence to be high, especially with these young players. And right now, Trey Wisner's a guy that's making headlines. Also, the offensive line, we've talked about it. It's a strength. It should be a strength. Talk about first world problems. Texas is right now dealing with a first world problem. Obviously, you got returning starters there on the offensive line, but one of the positions that you really haven't settled on is the left guard position. Most people believe Cam Williams is going to take that right tackle position. You got Jake Majors returning starter at the center position. Of course, Kelvin Banks, anchor of the O-line at the left tackle position as well. So it seems like at least you've got that core, and DJ Campbell looks like he's going to be that right guard for you. Who's going to end up being the left guard? Because now it seems like we're starting to see, or at least hear more about Hayden Connor. getting some of those first team reps to left guard. Early on, it was Neto Umeozulu getting some of those reps. Is it the plan to just cross train these guys and have a rotation of 7-8 guys, both of these guys getting those reps, or do you think you expect one of them to separate in that competition? Or are we just looking at trying to get the best 5 guys on the field?
I think that has to be the goal. You have a pretty interesting group right now, probably around 7 or 8 guys that you'd feel comfortable being on the field at any point. You have your starting offensive line when you add Cam Williams to this group, but you have 3 guys at left guard right now that really provide a lot of depth, a lot of experience with Hayden Conner, and a lot of talent. Obviously, Cole Hudson, one that we shouldn't forget in this conversation at all. He started his entire true freshman season at right guard. He was that physically ready as a true freshman to start all 12 games for the Longhorns early on. So encouraging there in the sense that I don't want to say he's being, kind of looked at as an afterthought, but when you talk about Neto Umeozulu and you talk about Hayden Conner, those are probably the 1A and the 1B guys at that left guard position at the moment. So great problem to have if you're Kyle Flood. Now the question becomes, do you go for the guy with experience? Do you go for the guy with the upside? And how do they gel together with Kelvin Banks and Jake Majors in the middle? The remaining 8 practices of the spring is going to be very interesting because we've seen it go from Hayden Conner's job to Nato's job. And now it looks like Hayden Conner's back in that, starting fold. Will they continue to flip-flop? I think you will see both guys continuing to get run at the left guard spot. The question becomes, is there a significant difference between the 2 of them in the running and the passing game? That is obviously what you want to see. One guy kind of take command and take control of that group. And as a result of this battle, you're able to, start cross-training Hayden Conner without the repercussions of being, depleting the depth on that offensive line. So encouraging stuff all around. Great problem to have if you're Kyle Flood. If I had to handicap this, left guard battle at any point right now, I'm a sucker for a guy that's played a lot of football. And I think Hayden Conner's played good football. And I think it's also expected that you could see another step up in his game, similarly to how you see steps up in games of just about anybody else at any other position. We talked about Quinn going from year 1 to year 2, again, from year 2 to year 3. That should also be the case for a guy like Hayden Conner. Now, I know Nato has that kind of feistiness you look for as a left guard, but it's tough to take away a guy that has 30 career starts at left guard for me.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It definitely is a first world problem for the Longhorns because they have options on the offensive line, and so it's a true competition, not a battle of attrition. I don't know if that competition will be settled in the spring. I think that's going to carry over into the fall. And I think maybe that's what the coaches want. It'd be great if one of those guys would separate, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if any of these, and there are not many open competitions on the 40 because guys are more competing for target share. They're competing for reps. Texas wants to rotate some guys. The 2 main positions that are open competitions pretty much are that off-ball linebacker spot, the left guard spot you're talking about. I guess punter pretty much would be up in there if you want to get really detailed about it. But there are not a lot of really got open jobs. You just guys, I think they're just competing for playing time. And I don't know if either one of those open jobs will be settled this spring. You feel like we're halfway through it now. Do you feel like there will be those jobs will be settled out of those open competitions this spring? I think most of them are going to carry over into the fall.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we've seen this staff, kind of take a while before giving up the reins to guys who, may not have earned it out of the spring camp or arrived late in the summer. So if you're counting on a guy like Silas Bolden to step in and be a big piece of this team, that you can still have that thought after the spring football season, even with some of these wide receivers making a lot of noise at the moment. If you look back, Derek Williams arrived late. Cole Hudson, a guy that Texas looked at, decided they liked and said, you know what? We're going to give you a shot as a true freshman right away. So it's really encouraging. Kelvin Banks, another, arrived with in the summer. And immediately Texas was like, you know what? We're going to give you a look in fall camp. And if we think that you earn this spot, you got to work for it here in fall camp before we give it to you. And sure enough, week 1, he was the guy trotting out there at left tackle. So this staff has proven time and time again to say it does not necessarily cement you on the depth chart what you do in spring camp. It's a good indicator of what you can be, but you can certainly go out and earn your job again in the fall, especially through the summer conditioning workouts. That'll be really interesting, again, just to kind of see where things sit now to where they go week one whenever the pads start getting, laced up once again this fall.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. One other little nugget here from Bobby's practice notes. I would encourage you to go over there. Lots of them on TexasFootball.com that I want to bring up since we're talking about Quinn. It's always good to get a Quinn update for the people. Says that he looks and feels more at ease, and that basically looks more at ease and in terms of getting to his reads quicker, and looks like it's more muscle memory going through those progressions. The offense seems to be second nature to him. It's kind of what I read between the lines with some of the practice reports about how at ease he looks within the offense. Going into his third year in this system, a lot of things are muscle memory to him now because he knows that system so well. I remember there was a moment where I remember having a conversation with Tom Herman about Sam Ehlinger and Sam Ehlinger's third year going in with that offense. And he said, Sam knows the offense so well now. He reveals things to me about my own offense. He'll come tell me something about my offense, something I didn't think about, something like a loophole or something that a more efficient way to do it. And I'll go, actually, that's a good point. You know what? I got to consider that. Because I never thought about it because I've never had somebody know my offense as well as I do. And that's where you want, I think, ultimately for a coach, you would like to get there for your quarterback to be able to have those types of conversations with you as an offensive play caller, as an offensive coordinator. And I'm hoping that that's where Quinn is now, where Quinn and Sark can have these deep philosophical conversations about that offense and go down the rabbit hole about the offense because Quinn knows it now just as well as Sark knows it. And that will help him feel pressure better in the pocket and become better at the pocket science of creating space for himself. That will help him get deeper into his progressions and quicker through his progressions as a quarterback. All of those little nuanced details that scouts really want to see.
Yeah, I'm sure those conversations with Sam and Coach Herman back in the day said, hey, how about we ran QB power to the right, out of 12 personnel rather than 11? Let's get me another extra blocker before we start, get me beat up every time I have to take off. But no, I think you're going to start seeing a little bit more of that from Quinn Ewers as well. Sarkisian system's a little bit, I'd say, more sophisticated, a little bit more nuanced in the sense of what it takes to, basically bring to the table from a schematic approach. But Quinn right now, this has been the recurring theme so far and probably the most, mentioned, theme so far this spring is with Quinn and with him coming into year 3, you're seeing him kind of approach this, I don't want to say laid back, but he's very comfortable. And I think it's because he's been in the system. He's been in the film rooms. He's known what it takes to go through spring practice so often that he kind of sits back and say, yeah, I know what it takes to be the quarterback at the University of Texas, and I know what it takes to have new faces around me at a number of positions. Because of that, I can kind of allow myself to look around and say, this is how it goes. I'm no longer looking to others. I'm not looking at Bijan to be the guy next to me in the backfield. I'm no longer relying on Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell to go make plays down the field with JT in the middle. No. Now I get to go make plays, and I know what it takes to be around a number of guys who are very talented, and I can look at my, weapons on the offensive side of the ball and say, yeah, these guys will stack up just fine in the SEC. And with that extra experience that we've talked about, you can only expect an improvement in play. I think it's one of those things that with Quinn Ewers, I think a lot of folks were very quick to say, you know what, he's not what we expected him to be. But that's a tough thing to do, Rod, when you haven't played in 2 years. You jump into a starting role at a Power 5 conference. So third year for Quinn Ewers, I think we've talked about it in the past, but 30-plus touchdowns is probably the floor for me. Pushing 4,000 passing yards, I think you'll see that happen as well. To me, it's all about taking over games, and that starts with being comfortable, being confident, and having a good pocket in front of you. You'll certainly see Quinn Ewers start to really take that extra step this year, I think.
Yeah, and I'm, it's right in the nick of time, too, because he lost all of his veteran seasoned pass catchers. He's going to have to teach that offense to those guys. I mean, he's going to be a tutor of sorts to those guys to try to get them to expedite that learning process of the offense because you need them to start quickly, to start fast. All right, good stuff. We'll get some of the questions here, but first, let's thank our sponsor of our Wednesday night live stream. Andy Ludicky, do you want control over your own destiny? If you do, then maybe a franchise ownership is right for you. If you think that could be the case, then call Andy Ludicky today. He's an expert at placing people in the right franchise that fits your strengths and finances. Franchise ownership isn't for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your own destiny, call Andy or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. That's Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. So thank you to Andy Ludicky for his support of our Wednesday night live stream. And thank you to all you guys out there for the questions. Keep them coming. A couple of good questions I want to throw out there right now, and I think a couple of these are related. Antoine says, do we think more or less guys redshirt than last year? Question I'll throw out there to you, CJ. That's a really good question. I think it relates to Tommy's question too. Tommy Zeno says, hey guys, with such a stacked roster at some positions, what are some of the hard talks Coach Sark will have to have? Some of those hard talks are going to be, all right, now you know what? We didn't tell you that you were going to redshirt, but it's pretty, you're going to have to redshirt because we're stacked at this roster. That is something I think for Texas. Maybe that's that first part of those first world problems we're talking about, that you're so stacked that guys now are willing to wait their turn because you're able to show players now that you can help them accomplish their ultimate dream, which is playing in the NFL, which we'll see later on this month in the NFL draft. But also, that patience will pay off in terms of the talent development. They watch the path of the guys in front of them. If you're in that running back room, you've watched Rojo and Bijan and now Jonathan Brooks, and if you're Trey Wise, you think to yourself, okay, I'm willing to wait my turn and develop behind those guys because I think I've seen it pay off. I see the payoff, and I think you can start that kind of pathway at a lot of different positions. And I think ultimately that could be the key to having a successful culture these days, especially with the transfer portal and with NIL. It's hard to convince guys, hey, redshirt and be patient. Here at Texas, Arch Manning being, I think, the primary example, maybe you can be the outlier in some ways with some positions in that manner.
Yeah, I think that redshirt conversation is pretty interesting because you're bringing in a lot of guys you expect to see on the field in some capacity this year. And that's not to discredit what we saw last year as well, but I think 15 guys a year ago ended up receiving their redshirt. I haven't double-checked that in a while, so it could be a little bit off. But when you look at the offensive line, you don't have as many there. And then, that was a big one. You had 5 last year. You have 3 freshmen this year. That'll change some numbers. You had 2 tight ends a year ago. You got 1 now. A number of linebackers a year ago, only 1 this year. So that's kind of where I'm kind of thinking, maybe this year you don't necessarily see as many because, again, you have guys that you expect to see at least on the special teams. I think in the defensive side of the ball, you have a lot of quick, speedy D-backs, and I think that's a position that you can use in special teams to kind of get them on the field and get acclimated to the speed of the game a little bit quicker than what you would see for a lot of guys in an offensive line or defensive line class that is super heavy. So when I look at this list now, I think, Rod, we can certainly cross off a number of names, Jarrett Gibson, Christian Clark. I think they'll both match that 4-game mark. Ryan Wingo, what we see from Aaron Butler the upcoming season remains to be seen. Will Texas use Jordan Washington to get him, quickly up to the speed of the game? Who knows? Defensively, Colin Simmons, not going to keep a red shirt on him. Xavier Filsaime, Jordan Johnson-Rubel, Kobe Black, a number of really talented defensive backs there that I think will certainly find a way onto the field for at least 4 games. Because, again, it's a really talented season. We're expecting Texas to be super talented as well. Do we see Arch Manning in a number of games last year if Texas takes care of business early on in games? I would expect so. Yeah. So if that's what you're expecting this year, especially with 4 non-conference games compared to 3 a year ago, that's one more opportunity for Texas to get some young guys on the field and really allow them to get their first crack at what it's like to be a college football player.
Yeah, another guy I'll throw out there because you mentioned a lot of them, and I agree with you. Alex January.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's a guy that's going to end up redshirting because You're hearing good things about him, and that's a position of need where a young guy can come in and contribute right away. So, yes, I mean Sark at this point bringing those young guys in. I don't know what I don't know what the recruiting sales pitch is, but these guys seem like they want to play, and I think Sark. We know Sark actually it will let a freshman play quick if he's good enough, he's old enough in Sark's system, Sark's culture. Hey, UT boy, thank you very much for the super chat there. We appreciate it, UT boy. Very kind of you. Hey, Longhorns for life, baby. All right. On Texas football family. We appreciate you guys. No question about it. All right. Getting back to some of the other questions here, because we got a couple of good ones. How about this one? I'll take this one, Nate, because it's DB related. Are the coaches emphasizing playing the ball in the air to our DBs, getting their hands on more footballs? They should. I'm on the record for saying I do believe that ball hawking, the ball hawk ability, that part of that havoc minded mindset, ball first, ball centric mindset is something that usually is programmed early in DBs, or is something that's innate and natural in DBs. I'm talking about guys who just go after the football. And Texas, I do believe that Malik Muhammad's got some of that in him. I think he's got some of that ball hawk mentality in him. Makuba is a guy that makes a lot of splash plays. I don't know if I describe him as a ball hawk though. A guy that makes a lot of plays on the football. Jahdae Barron could do it, but Jahdae Barron, I don't know if I describe him as one of those ball hawks either. He's more of a technician and he's a havoc player, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to get his hands on a lot of footballs. So I think this season, the start of it, and Sark talked about this in the last media availability, they want to take away, he talked about early downs, playing better pass defense on early downs. And I think what he means by that is taking away the easy, quick game completions that they gave up a lot last year on early downs to just keep drives alive for the teams. You want to force teams into third down, preferably third and long. That's when the odds flip in favor of the defense. So I think in order for them to get their hands on more balls, what they're going to do is just play tighter coverage. And what I mean by play tighter coverage is they're going to play more bump and run press man, which they did at the end of the season last season. Go back and watch it. At the end of the season, in the Tech game, in the Big 12 title game against Oklahoma State, and the Washington game, Texas plays more bump and run on the field and the boundary side than they played all season long. And they did indeed take away the short, quick game, easy completions on early downs, and they took away the inside breaking routes, which were great. And they actually defended bunch formations even better, which is something they hadn't done really well all season long. The problem is that when they came up and played bump and run, they took away the easy, quick stuff. They gave up the deep ball against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State killed them with the deep ball, but it didn't matter because Texas was just whipping Oklahoma State, and that was the best red zone offense Texas played all year, so they blew them out. And then against Washington was able to just massacre Texas. They just feasted on the deep ball. So that's going to be, to me, the thing that DBs have to work on. It's not so much getting their hands on balls. That would be great if they could just get a lot of interceptions. That'd be great. And this year, the pressure, which is going to come from the edges, which hasn't been the case for a Sark team yet. Most of your pressure has been coming from the interior because of Coburn, because of Ojimo, because of, obviously Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So now those guys are gone, and your edges are a strength now. I think the theory is that now that the pressure is coming from the edges, you're collapsing the pocket from the edges. Maybe that'll force the quarterback to step up in the pocket. You'll collapse it that way, and then you could get more splash plays, either get the sacks or get different kind of pressure, because you were still top 10 in pressures among Power 5 teams the last 2 years. It just wasn't pressure that resulted and converted into sacks or more splash plays. What you want is pressure to convert into turnovers or takeaways or into sacks or negative plays. So maybe, just a different theory, since the pressure will be coming from the edges instead of the interior, maybe that'll lead to more takeaways. Maybe that'll lead to more sacks. We don't know. That's just, like I said, the theory that I think the coaches are going with too. Do that and play more press man on the outside, which will take away the easy completions, but you better be prepared to defend the deep ball. That is going to be the counter for teams. So as a DB, that's what I'm concerned about, but I do believe edge pressure, tighter coverage should equal to more hands-on footballs.
Rod, I wanted to ask you this because, I've had some time playing DB, but never to the level of you, obviously. And so I understand it's difficult, and it's not something that very quickly you can pick up on if you've been always taught to fight through hands, if you've always been taught to, if you're in phase, don't turn around because you'll lose track of your guy wherever you are on the field. If that's how you've been taught or instructed before college, how difficult is it to pick up that new approach to, I got to turn to find the ball and make a play on it rather than fighting through the hands of a defender, which it appears to me that's kind of what Texas strives to do. You don't see a lot of heads turning whenever you're running down the field. A lot of them is, guys stay on the hip and they fight through hands, or when the hands shoot, they find a way to, try to disrupt it. That's kind of what I see so far with this Texas defensive back group. Is that a difficult thing to do? Is it easily something that you could pick up in a spring, in a fall camp? What's kind of the process in adding to your bag as a DB there?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can improve on it. You can improve, no doubt about it. And Coach Aquino used to call it kind of a panic plan. So when the ball's in the air, the ball is deep in the air, you have to figure out quickly and process quickly based on where your position is. All right. If you are in phase or out of phase, in phase means you're in a position to play the football. Out of phase means you're out of position, so you better play the receiver. I mean, it goes back to what you're talking about: play the hands, or play the eyes, or play through the hands. And basically, what you're asking is, why don't they always try to strive to be in phase, where they can play the football every time? I do think they can improve on it. That's about technique. A lot of that is your technique and your leverage. I don't think they use proper leverage enough at Texas. I think, and what I mean by that, I mean they should be hard inside leverage when they're playing man coverage, even sometimes when they're playing match quarters, when it's a zone that ends up deteriorating into a man. Or I think they should be playing inside and use the sideline if you're the outside corners, and use the sideline. They don't use the sideline enough to me. I would smother guys on the sideline. And when you have those deep passes, I would want to be in a position. Ideally, I want it to be in a look and lean position, as a coach Aquino would call it, look and lean. So I can look back for the football and lean and feel the receiver as I lean into him. And if I'm looking back for the football, I can, based on the rules, based by the definition rule, I actually can interfere with the receiver because I'm playing the football. I'm a receiver myself. So I can lean against him, and if my running motion is a little weird and ends up elbowing him in the chest and pushing him to the sideline, hey, that's okay because I'm playing the football and I can look and lean into the receiver. So the truth is, I never like being rigid and telling a DB you have to play every situation the same way, because you're never going to be in a situation. Everything's going to be a little different. It's never going to be the exact same situation. So you give a DB tools to work with, and then they have to decide based on the circumstance, based on the situation that they're in, what tool that they want to utilize at that time. And I think for what you're saying is for the Texas DBs, they need to be in phase, in better position so they can play the football more often. And I think what Texas DBs want to do is they want to – this is early on. This is not later on in the season when they were playing more bump and run. But prior to that, they were basically worried about giving up the deep ball, and they wanted to contain any deep balls downfield. But they gave up a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of inside breaking routes, a lot of quick game, because they were trying to defend the deep ball and not give up the deep ball, force teams to march the length of the field, which I totally get. So they just – right now they just didn't have – the DBs who are confident enough to play bump and run coverage on early downs and do it with effective enough technique where they also can safeguard against the deep ball. And that's what you always got to defend the deep ball, but you need to be in a good position to defend the deep ball based on, because you can take away a lot of routes with just leverage. I can take away the slant route with just leverage alone. I ain't even really got to play it. I can just kind of sit inside a yard and a half. Slant is taken away pretty much. Right. And if I'm late to it, I can rally to it, but I'll be in a really good position because he's got to cross my face to get to that slant route. So I can play that with leverage. And then you can defend the deep ball with technique, right? Depending on how the release of the receiver, how you pin them to the sideline. So you can play the deep ball with technique, defend the inside cut with leverage, and depending on the down and distance, you want to be more aggressive or less aggressive depending on what you believe you're defending and where the marks are and where the actual chains are. So that's how I would play it. But like I said, I don't know exactly what these guys are being taught. They're being taught different things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think what you just put us through was just a classic DB clinic, Rod. I think that was good stuff. You had information on when to be fighting through the hands, fighting, looking back, turning to the ball. I think leverage, I think you're right about leverage. That's one of the most underrated aspects of a defensive back is knowing, one, the down and distance, two, the tendencies of a wide receiver, and three, where your strengths are as a defensive back. So if Texas is able to use more of that this year, you should certainly see some more interceptions, some more PBUs. And with this talented group, there's no reason you shouldn't see an increase already. So I'm all for it. I think this group of DBs is a talented one. And if you're able to create more opportunities for this offense to go put on points, I think everybody would take that trade-off.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. That's a good point. And appreciate. I can talk DB stuff all damn day long, so I apologize for the loquacious response to my man CJ there. All right, so hey Tommy, thank you very much. Hey, trust Baby Monroe appreciates you too, man. She needs more diapers, more diaper money. The more you can give, the better. Appreciate you guys. All right, here's something for CJ. This comes from my man David Keith Williams. Always has great stuff. He wants to know, CJ, what is your view of Ty Anthony Smith? He's the only linebacker in the 2024 class, but his listed weight is below 200 pounds. He said, I'm sure that he'll add weight, but the 2025 linebacker targets Elijah Barnes and Riley Pettijohn, if they commit, will both get to Texas weighing 220 to 225. What are your thoughts about Ty Anthony Smith and his development? Is he a project more than anything coming in that light?
Yeah, I mean, Ty Anthony's a great player. There's a reason why he was as coveted as he was coming out of high school. Coming out of Jasper, you don't see, the likes of Georgia, Alabama, Oregon all flocking down to see you. That's just not necessarily what has been the case. And it is the case again this year because Keone Armstrong is that talented of a tight end. But Ty Anthony essentially was the guy that helped get those guys down there in the first place. So with Ty Anthony, I think the biggest thing is obviously putting on weight. He's right around 200, 205 pounds right now. You can't play at that weight inside the box in the SEC. That's just, we know that to be a fact. But I do think what we have seen in the past with some of these guys who come from some of those smaller programs is that it takes time. DeMarvion Overshown was not physically ready year one or basically year two to play as a linebacker. And I think that's kind of the case. I know he was going through a position change there, but, it takes time in the weight room and in a nutritional system at the next level to get your body 100% ready for college football, especially in the SEC. So Ty Anthony, right now, I see no issue with the track that he is on. It's going to take time. We knew this coming in. And with this group of linebackers at the moment, I don't think many expected him to kind of step into this role and compete and find a way onto the field right away. You would love to see it, obviously. But again, knowing that he signed at around 190, 195 pounds, and when I saw him in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl, he was around the same weight. You could see him in pads against other All-Americans and think, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time here, which is perfectly okay. I'm of the belief, and I've said this a number of times, if you can redshirt as many players as you can in a given year as true freshmen, your program's going to be much better off because of it. Because it allows them to sit back. It allows them to get that extra year if necessary. And it allows them to basically say, you know what? I understand what it's like. Practice is going to be my time to really fine-tune my skills. And I can focus on me becoming the better player that I can. I know that's not always the approach that you see a lot of guys, especially in the day of the portal age. But essentially, if you're able to take a step back, reflect on yourself, and become a better, individual player, your career should be, sped up a little bit in terms of development. So for Ty Anthony this year, that's a redshirt candidate through and through. But his, career trajectory, I don't think it's deterred by what his weight is at the moment at all.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, though, about DeMarvion Overshown, too. I remember when Overshown was a work in progress, and certainly now in the NFL. He's actually even bulked up now in the league now a little bit more, too. You seen him?
Oh, yeah.
Nice pictures. He's put on probably maybe 10 pounds, but it's muscle, man. He's pretty rocked up. So good stuff there. Thanks for my man, CJ. All right, another question here, and this one I think is relates to a topic I want to bring up. Daniel Daniel Earp, we appreciate this. Wants to know, what is the last skilled player on offense we're excited to see play on Sunday? I have super high hopes for X and Quinn. Well, prior to Bijan, I think we should go prior to Bijan, because obviously Bijan, everybody was excited about watching Bijan last year. And Arthur Smith, they talk about a buzzkill. Everybody's excited about watching Bijan. People drafting Bijan number one in their fantasy leagues. And that might be one of the biggest disappointments of the season. And it was not Bijan's fault, by the way. It was all Arthur Smith, who is now that's the reason he's now the OC with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's the lesson, right? You play Bijan and you won't get fired. Ask Tom Herman. Yeah, if you don't play Bijan, you got Bijan on your roster and you're not playing Bijan and not giving him the ball for whatever reason.
Hey, Rod, we all as Texas, folks that follow Texas, we should all sit back here and before 21 days from now when the NFL draft starts kicking off, better start praying that A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Worthy don't end up as Pittsburgh Steelers. Because that's exactly, we're going to see the exact same case with Bijan Robinson a year ago, with either of them if they end up in the black and yellow next year. So keep them away from Arthur Smith and allow them to go to a system where an offensive coordinator will scheme them open and use them for the weapons that they are and the weapons in which the general manager looked at them and drafted them so early. So poor Bijan, man, that was tough. But to answer that question, I mean,
great point there, CJ. Don't forget, they also would have quarterback Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Please proceed.
Yeah, good luck with either of them. Exactly. So to answer that question, I would have to, obviously Bijan's the number one guy, but before him, I mean, it would have to be Duvernay, right? Like we were excited just because at that point there wasn't really anybody else that you could point to. It took a while. I know Malcolm Brown had a good run. Fozzie had a great run, but neither of them, I would say, were necessarily in that conversation to go day one, day two. Malcolm Brown might have. I don't necessarily remember where he was drafted, but, it took a long time. It took a long time. And I think that was the excitement then with Tom Herman at the helm was, we're sending guys back to the league. Like, we're going to have some guys to root for on Sundays. Whereas now it's, they're going to go in and they're going to dominate from day one. This is the new standard. So I would say most folks are pretty excited. Thank you, Steve Sarkisian, for kind of changing how we're talking about the NFL draft, because for you and I, it's significantly more exciting to kind of sit here and ponder about where these guys are going to go to the NFL draft, what kind of fits they'll be with a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, or, can Jonathan Brooks end up with a star on his helmet? That's fun now, because again, for 15 years, essentially, you didn't have this conversation, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Now we get to sit here and pontificate about it and really get, to have fun when the NFL draft is brought up again. Yeah, no, you're right about that. It's in terms of guys who were drafted high that we were really excited about watching, it's been a really, really long time. In terms of offensive skill position guys, it's been a really, really long time. I mean, you got to go back to the mid to late 2000s. Because defensively, they've had a lot of great players drafted high who we're really excited about watching. But offensively, like I said, it's been a while since they've had a group coming out that's this talented. I mean, you're going to have potentially 2 wide receivers drafted in the first round. Prior to that, the only first round wide receiver, I believe, was Roy Williams. Yeah. It's been a minute. Right? And I'll throw a group at you, Rod, that I thought at the time around 2016, 2017, I thought to me was very talented. They made plays in the kick return game, made splash plays all across the field. But that group, Tom Herman's first year of Reggie Hentful-Maps and Lil Jordan Humphrey, and then you get the youngins of Colin Johnson and Devin Duvernay in that group. I thought that was a pretty talented group. Lil Jordan Humphreys, he's stuck around in the league. He and Sean Payton, seem to have a pretty close bond when it comes to bouncing around the NFL and sticking around in the league for a little bit. So credit to him. But, again, when it comes to the NFL draft, you just didn't see, I guess, the outcome or the picks or the selections that you would hope to see for the guys that, were making big-time plays on a given Saturday. No, that wide receiving core, you're right, CJ, man. It was so underrated because big Colin Johnson, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Devin Duvernay, you're right. That was a very underrated wide receiving core, man. That was one of the best. That was a hard group to maintain. Speaking of the wide receivers, I saw this because
we don't talk a lot of NFL here, but the big news in the NFL today, my Houston Texans, Nick Cook-Serio, as they call him, he's cooking in the kitchen, made a trade for Stephon Diggs, the wide receiver from Buffalo. So the reason it affects the Longhorns is because now everybody seems to believe that Buffalo is going to draft a wide receiver in the first round. They draft late. They draft at, I think, 28 in the first round. That's the sweet spot right around where A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy's names are going to be popping up if you're drafting a wide receiver. Matt Miller does a great job at NFL Draft Scout. He does a really good job, and he follows the Longhorns too, so he's close to it. He said via a tweet after that trade, wide receiver names to know in Buffalo: Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Xavier Legette, and he also said Thomas likely off the board at 28 overall. So basically, he's saying it's 4 names to consider there at 28 for the Buffalo Bills to replace Stephon Diggs, and 2 of them are Longhorns. I saw that it was, I believe it was Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft. Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft. Yes, he has A.D. Mitchell going 28 to the Buffalo Bills. I've seen a few earlier mock drafts from Mel Kiper that had A.D. Mitchell going to the Bills. It does make sense. And CJ, that's right around that spot where, the Longhorn receivers should be considered. Josh Allen is not a bad franchise quarterback to go to if you're one of those Texas wide receivers. Probably don't want to go play in Buffalo because of how damn cold it is, but the money will warm you up a little bit.
Hey, I was just thinking, I was doing a bit of my mock draft 2.0 for the Longhorns, which I'll release tomorrow on Texas Football. So get excited, get amped tonight. Make sure you're
nice.
Getting your ample rest before that drops tomorrow morning. But I did come across number 23, the Los Angeles Chargers. Because who did they depart with this year? Keenan Allen's in Chicago. Mike Williams is no longer on the roster. You're looking at a wide receiving core with Quentin Johnson as your number 1, who did not put up a very good rookie season this year. Joshua Palmer, Darius Davis. I mean, that group alone, not very encouraging when you have a guy like Justin Herbert, who is in the conversation for being a Pro Bowler and, a borderline All-Pro on a given season. So I know Jim Harbaugh's kind of whole philosophy is we're going to beat you with our offensive line. We're going to pound the run. But at some point, you've got to help your quarterback here a little bit. Again, because you just don't have necessarily big-time weapons to go get, the football for him. So if there's an option here, and I'm not saying it's a for sure case or that the Chargers are even going to go with a wide receiver in round 1, but at 23, that's kind of the mark to me. Maybe that's the first option you see A.D. Mitchell go. And that kind of opens up the board a little bit more for Xavier Worthy, a little bit more options to end up in that first round. Because right now, I think we're kind of looking at it like, it's probably Kansas City or bust for Xavier Worthy in that first round, despite the 4.2 140. And so if you see A.D. Mitchell go earlier, if you see the Chargers trade back, I'm looking at them as a possible landing spot. You get to go play in a dome, get to go live in L.A. Rod, to me, that sounds like a pretty sweet gig, especially when you compare that to Buffalo and how cold it gets up there.
Yeah, I think actually Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell are going to end up in really good spots. I think they're going to fall to the bottom of that first round, and there is no better spot than Kansas City. So if either one of those guys goes to Kansas City, that's money. Either of them end up with Buffalo. That's also a great spot for those guys because you got a franchise quarterback. I believe is Joe Brady still the OC there in Buffalo now? Isn't it Joe Brady? I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it's Joe Brady. Yeah, he's the OC there now.
I actually saw an interesting thing about earlier today, Rod. Stephon Diggs wasn't happy his last year and a half, I would say, in Buffalo. He just, he didn't have that spark. He didn't have kind of that juice that made him Stephon Diggs. And I wish I remembered who tweeted it out, but they basically said, the inability of Joe Brady to scheme open his best targets was the downfall of Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. And I thought that was very interesting. He went from averaging over 85 yards per game before Brady to just over 48. So a pretty noticeable, sizable, marginal difference there for Stephon Diggs. And I know that there was an issue with his attitude at the time, his rapport with Josh Allen. But when you go back and you look at it, it makes sense because Joe Brady, originally at the Panthers did not stick around a whole lot after his famed run at LSU as the co-OC there. So it's a bit interesting. You'd love to go play with Josh Allen. You'd love to go play for a contender. But at the same point, if you're a wide receiver and you're Xavier Worthy or an A.D. Mitchell, you want to go play for an offensive coordinator and a scheme and a quarterback that values you and uses you in ways that you can get open. That was the best thing about Steve Sarkisian. And one thing that will never go away with his play calling is that he will find mismatches with his best wide receivers, and he will find ways to get them the rock, regardless of how it is, whether it's lining Xavier Worthy up out of the slot, out of the outside, if he has to use orbit or jet motion to get him open as well. So that's one thing with Joe Brady that I'm a little bit hesitant of, but at some point the Bills are going to have to take a wide receiver. And at that spot 28, I mean, it's hard not to look at either Texas wide receiver and say, yeah, they would be a good fit there.
Yeah, it's so weird that Joe Brady's fall from grace because I guess at ultimately LSU, he had so many weapons. He didn't have to scheme guys open. Jamar Chase.
I think that was his issue,
basically you just create one-on-one situations. You can engineer one-on-one. Justin Jefferson's going to win. Jamar Chase is going to win. That's not always necessarily scheming guys open. And Sark does a great job of manufacturing one-on-ones too, but he also does a really good job of scheming guys open. And the tweet you're talking about from Scott Barrett, he says, I asked a big-name NFL insider about Joe Brady. When the Bills first promoted him to OC, he told me he's not very, very well respected around the league because he doesn't know how to scheme guys open. And then he goes through the stats that you just brought up and talked about DJ Moore finishing as Carolina's wide receiver 3 behind Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel and points. I think he's talking about fantasy football, so I think it's a points per a PPR league. Sorry, PPR.
Rod, you know what that is? You know what that quote is to me? It's a red flag. That is a red flag right there. If you can't scheme your best players open, I don't want my best players playing for you. That's kind of the whole thing. And to your point about him kind of having too much wealth of talent at LSU, Thaddeus Moss, the son of Randy Moss, was his fourth option. That's a pretty darn good group that you got to throw to a very talented quarterback. So, I think the shine is off of Joe Brady a little bit. So we'll see how that shapes up. But, hey, I think it'll be a little bit of one of those praying spots for these Texas wide receivers to say, yeah, let me go find a spot with a coordinator that can scheme me open and a quarterback that will find me the ball. There aren't many of those spots in the league.
All right, CJ, you got that's a great way to commit to the bit, man. The red flag. Well done. I don't know if you had that already. Is this a bit that you've been ready to pull out and ready to unveil, or did you already just have randomly a red towel there and decided, you know what, red flag? Let us in the psychology here.
Yeah, I keep my Rangers postseason towel on my desk at all point. Now I'm like, all right, this is the perfect time to bring it up. Talking about red flags.
I think it was a hit, man. I think it was a hit. Well done. Good stuff there. All right. I like that. Red flag. No question about it. So, yeah, you do have – and also, so we're talking Longhorns and the NFL, and we'll get back to Texas spring football and some of your questions here in a second. But you actually tweeted this out earlier today, CJ, and I saw on your Twitter account, and by the way, you should follow CJ at CJ Vogel _OTF. So follow the man. He's worth every follow he gets because he does a great job. But you tweet this out: 3 Texas draft hopefuls visiting the Cowboys today, and you were kind of quote tweeting, an Ian Rappaport tweet which had the Cowboys hosting several local talented draft prospects today, including Jonathan Brooks, JT Sanders, and Byron Murphy. Do we think there's a chance that a Longhorn can end up as a Dallas Cowboy? What are the odds? Cowboys got some serious. We can talk Cowboys for another 30, 40 minutes on this show because I got some hot takes about the Cowboys. Who don't at this point? But yes, CJ, do you think it's possible that with all the needs the Cowboys have on their roster right now, that a Longhorn could potentially fill those needs in the draft? Jonathan Brooks seems to be the most popular pick right now when it comes to projecting or predicting a Longhorn that the Cowboys might draft, because they had the surgeon. Their team surgeon is the one that did the surgery on Jonathan Brooks. They do have an inside information there, inside track to know about the recovery and the rehab for Jonathan Brooks. And also I saw on NFL Live, they also said that the Cowboys should pick Jonathan Brooks probably in the second round. They said he should be a guy that the Cowboys eye in the NFL draft. What are your thoughts, CJ, about the odds or the chances of a Cowboys drafting a Longhorn?
It's always fun now because obviously with DeMarvio and Overshown there, we heard about the story of him and Paxton Anderson, Jerry's grandson, who was on the team at Texas, kind of having that kind of connection. They were locker mates a little bit. Could there be a quote unquote pipeline? We know Jerry likes his Arkansas guys. They find a guy seemingly every year. Which Texas guy falls under that umbrella right now to me is Jonathan Brooks. And I think it's because Cowboys need to go offensive line in the first round. I think that's without a doubt where they need to go, especially with Tyron Smith retiring. You kind of have a big spot on your offensive line you got to figure out. You also like where Jake Ferguson's kind of emerged in his, a spot for the Cowboys offense, especially when you have Luke Schoonmaker, who you spent a day 2 pick from Michigan on a year ago as well. So right now, I'm not sure JT is that guy for the Cowboys. Could they use an increased, tight end in the passing game? Sure. But again, I think Jake Ferguson is fine for what he does. And I thought in the back half of that year in 2023, he actually came on pretty strong. So to me, Jonathan Brooks makes the most sense. Again, he did the work on his the Cowboys doctor did the work on his torn ACL. They know how familiar he is. When you look at that Cowboys depth chart right now, who's there to stop Jonathan Brooks from potentially being that number one guy? Rico Dowdle is on roster, Deuce Vaughn, Malik Davis. I mean, at some point, they're talented running backs, of course, but Jonathan Brooks was in the running for the Doak Walker Award before he tore his ACL. So to me, the Cowboys at 56 is probably the most likely spot that you'll see Jonathan Brooks at this moment. Things could certainly change, and you never know how kind of strung out the Cowboys are about drafting running backs early after Ezekiel Elliott, but it just makes a lot of sense on paper at the moment.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like I said, I've seen multiple mock drafts, NFL Live bring it up, and the Cowboys love to roll the dice in the second round. They take chances with their second round picks, and not that Jonathan Brooks would be rolling the dice, but coming off an injury, that would be considered more of a high risk pick, but it could pay huge dividends because when he fully recovers, you get a number one running back, basically a top tier running back, first round caliber running back at second round value. That's the NFL in a nutshell. You want that value.
I did it with Jalen Smith, the linebacker out of Notre Dame, who, again, tore up his knee in the bowl game. It was projected top 5, top 10 pick. Cowboys said, no, second round, you're ours. So a lot of teams didn't like him, didn't want to touch him. And sure enough, the Cowboys, like you said, Rod, will take risks in that second round.
Yeah, they do. They find it. Something else I want to throw out there, Matt Miller, we just had one of his tweets because he does a really good job. I saw this a couple of days ago since we're talking NFL, and we'll get back to your questions here about Texas football. But he tweeted this out. I don't know if you saw it. You probably did, about JT Sanders and about Jared Wiley, actually. The Jared Wiley shout out, but kind of, I don't know, it was a knock on JT Sanders. He said, can't remember if I've said this before on here, but I'm a Jared Wiley fan, tight end 4, but could see him being drafted higher than JT Sanders because he can play inline and win. Really fun prospect who has tools to be much more productive in the pros. Has JT Sanders' stock dropped in the scouting process? It seems like it has. Am I the only one who feels that way?
No, I think it has. And I mean, okay. I thought he came away from the combine with a pretty solid, kind of aura around his draft stock. He was one of those guys where, again, you watch him run routes at that tight end spot and you think, yeah, great hands, probably the smoothest routes of anybody that, isn't Brock Bowers at the combine. The question then started to arise during the pro day when it just didn't seem like JT Sanders was there mentally. He only had 8 reps on the bench, 29 inches in the vertical. It wasn't a great broad jump as well. I believe right around 9.6. For whatever the reason, it just didn't feel like that was a do or die situation for him or the biggest job interview of his life. Again, 90 plus scouts in attendance, 3 NFL head coaches, and it just wasn't a great showing for him at the time. Is that the end of the world for JT Sanders? No, because he's a great football player, and we've seen the tape, over and over about how impactful he can be when on the field. But when you're dealing with NFL GMs and scouting execs, the whole question becomes, why shouldn't we draft you? You're in the conversation because we know you're a talented football player. But if I'm going to put my job on the line and make sure that I'm getting my pick right, I got to know exactly what I'm getting into. And right now, I think there's a little bit of question marks about JT Sanders, especially over the last month or two.
Man, somebody's going to get a hell of a deal if he drops in the draft. Going to drop to like the third round. Somebody's going to get a damn good tight end, a starting caliber tight end in the league. I will say that Texas, the tight end position, recently, if Jared Wiley ends up going to the league or getting drafted, I mean, he was once on the Texas roster as a tight end. That's pretty good. JT Sanders, obviously, as a tight end. Texas actually underrated when it comes to producing NFL tight ends recently. It's not, it's kind of under the radar thing. Sometimes they're drafted because they're great blockers or something like that. But so many tight ends have been underrated here. Andrew Beck. Now, Andrew Beck was a tight end / fullback, H-back, still in the league, if I'm not mistaken, right? For the Texans, I believe. I just think it kind of goes under the radar, but it at one point it was a thriving position on the 40 acres. Then it became an endangered species for a while, and I think now, like a lot of endangered species, they kind of re-emerging. It's like now we protected the endangered species, we put it into a protected habitat, made sure it could thrive, and now the tight end position now is back thriving on the 40 acres. I feel like. All right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I was a bit surprised by that love for Jared Wiley, because during his time at Texas, and credit to the TCU staff, because I think they got a little bit extra out of Jared Wiley that Texas didn't necessarily unlock or at least unleash whenever he was on campus. He was not a physical tight end, and I think that was one of the things that you watch his games at 6'7" and you think, yeah, of course he should be moving folks around. He was a former college or a former high school quarterback. So again, that jump from quarterback to the trenches in the world of college football, not an easy thing to do regardless of how big you are. So credit to TCU for kind of unlocking that bit of his game a little bit. And you're starting to see how those last 2 years in Fort Worth were used. He was used in the passing game a little bit more. They schemed him open at times. He's a big red zone threat. Plus, as you mentioned, being used on the end line, it certainly paid dividends for how high his ceiling could be in the NFL.
That's a good point. Because he had the NFL measurables. Didn't he play quarterback in high school? Is that Jerry Wiley I'm thinking about? When he had quarterback?
He threw to Quentin Johnston. How fun of a connection that was. Funny enough.
That is crazy. That's probably wild.
Here's a fun recruiting story. So I made the trip to go see Jared Wiley. It was what ended up being his last high school game. He was the quarterback. He threw to Quentin Johnston. I think Quentin had 3 touchdowns in that game, and they were all on 9 routes. He said, you know what, set hike, go deep. And Quentin Johnston running a 4.4 and being as freakishly athletic as he was would just toast whoever was on the opposite side of the field. Guess who he played in that game? That was their last game. They ended up losing this game. It was a big upset. They played Mesquite Horn. It was a junior year Kendrick Blackshear.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I drove up there from Austin with a buddy of mine who was a linebacker at Lamar, played a year at North Texas as well. And we remember sitting there thinking, you know what, that kid across the ball is looking like quite the athletic specimen. Sure enough, turns into Kendrick Blackshear, transfers to Duncanville, goes to Alabama. The rest is history. Now at Texas. But funny how these recruiting circles always come back. That's one of the first for me that I can look back and say, whoa, look at these old guys,
It's always fun when you go, because you obviously do it a lot because you go get eyes on these prospects. When you go out to watch one prospect and then another one catches your eye, you're like, whoa, yeah, who's that? Who's number 18? Who's that kid? And he may be some sophomore or something, but you go, no, I'm writing him down right now. I'm going to ask coach about him. Yeah, I mean, that's what recruiting is in a nutshell, right? It's basically why you guys go get
me on the sideline, just like, yeah, I'm taking that name, that number. I'll be in contact with him,
Yeah. It's like a stock, man. You want to buy low. You want to start mentioning that name so you can be like, oh yeah, I was on them when he was a sophomore. I
Yeah,
went
exactly. I got to be the first to tweet about this cat. That's for sure.
That's legit. That's why my man CJ Vogel is the man. Him and Jerry Hamilton, they both are always early on these guys. All right, I know we're getting close to it here. I got a couple other questions here that I want to bring up. UT Boy, shout out to UT Boy, always showing the love. UT Boy, La Familia says, Rod Babers, CJ Vogel, in y'all's opinion, is Jonte getting overlooked by the fans, or does he just need to go show them? Thanks for all you guys do. He is being overlooked. Yeah, I think he is. I think a lot of the talk right now is about Isaiah Bond and there's the novelty element, the new element. We like what's new, what's flashy, something we haven't seen yet. And Jonte Cook, we've talked about Jonte Cook, that we have familiarity with Jonte Cook. Coach Sark likes Jonte Cook. And I think now there's a fascination, at least from the fan standpoint, of getting to know the new receivers. Who are those new guys? What does Sark have to say about those new guys? How are they acclimating to the system? What's their chemistry with Quinn? The truth is, the reason that Jonte is being overlooked is because we know he's got chemistry with Quinn. He knows the system. Sark has a circle of trust. He talked about it. He actually referenced the trust. They asked him, hey, Sark, how do receivers get in the rotation? He said, trust. That's why I started calling it the circle of trust. If you don't penetrate that circle of trust, you ain't going to be on the field. And there's some guys who are in the circle at the beginning of the season, and then they're kicked out of the circle of trust by the end of the season, Casey Kane. So it happens to everybody, right? So I think for these young guys, earning Sark's trust is going to be big. Jonte's already earned it. Sark trusts him. Sark has talked about last year, I got to get that guy on the field more. He's got the chemistry with Quinn. All the challenges that the new guys are coming in that they're going to have to overcome, he doesn't have to. So I'm going to agree with the UT Boy. Yeah. And I think he's going to show out, but I do think he's being overlooked. I do. And I don't think it's Longhorn fans being disrespectful. I just think they're fascinated with the newness of those new acquisitions that Texas has via the transfer portal. Yeah. And Ryan Wingo too. He's new too. Ryan Wingo. I know that. That's part of that too.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach there because this is the time for Jonte Cook to go show out and be that guy. He's had that leg up in the system. He's had the only receptions of any Texas wide receiver on campus right now to have catches from Quinn Ewers in a game last year. So it is that time that we should be hearing about Jonte a little bit more in my eyes. We're hearing a lot about Isaiah Bond. We know at the moment, Ryan Wingo is going to be special. It's going to be hard to keep him off the field. Plus, we've heard great things about Matthew Golden. Those three right now have kind of been the three receivers I've heard the most about so far this offseason. Yeah. A bit surprising because, again, like you, Rod, I think coming into this spring, it was how quickly can Isaiah Bond, Jonte Cook, and whoever's in the slot start separating themselves. And I don't necessarily think that's been the situation or the case that I've come to expect coming into the spring, but that's not to say it won't be the case come the fall. And there's still, kind of that halfway point in the spring for things to be turned up a notch to kind of, see or at least cement or stamp yourself as one of the guys in that wide receiving room. So for Jonte Cook, I want to hear about him. There's a big opportunity this this weekend for Texas in their first scrimmage to go out there, make some big plays, and get your name talked about a little bit more. Because like you said, there's been some talks about this wide receiving room. And I think a lot of that shine is about the newness and kind of how, uncertain it is. It's a new shiny toy rather than the one that you play with every day. So that I get that. But at that same point, I need to start hearing about that name a little bit more.
That's a good point. No, you're right about it. It is the time, because if not, then there's some other guys who are proven commodities who would be willing to step into that role if Jonte Cook doesn't necessarily separate and elevate his game. I think he will, and I do think he'll be competing even to be the one who has the majority of the target share. I do think Isaiah Bond ultimately will end up being that guy, but I expect Jonte Cook to have production that is no less than declares him the number 2 receiver on the roster. No doubt about that. All right, a couple of quick questions. RW, he wants to know, CJ, first off, did Texas back off the Geyer D tackle? That's the first question W wants. And then the second one is, how's Colin Simmons looking? So kind of a double question there from my man RW.
Yeah, Collins looked good. He's still a freshman, so he's still getting up to speed with the game. But the burst, the quickness, the twitch, everything that you want off the edge is there. Everything that he was kind of hyped up to be coming out of high school, you see kind of the little sparks and what made him a 5-star guy. Unfortunately for Colin, I mean, that room is very talented, and it's in that conversation for being, in my eyes, one of the most pro-ready groups on the team when you consider the tight end, or when you consider the quarterbacks. And obviously the running backs are very talented as well. That defensive edge room right now with Trey Moore coming in, Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, now Colton Vosick fully healthy. Oh, and you get to have a number of guys like Zeno Umeozulu, Billy Walton making some noise. It's a crowded room. So maybe a reason why you're not specifically hearing about Colin Simmons the way that you're hearing about a Ryan Wingo at the moment could be a reason. But to the other question about Xavier Ukpono, the defensive tackle out of Denton Guyer, Texas is in on him. They certainly are. They were expecting him back on campus this weekend. I do not believe that that unofficial is going to take place. At the moment, I just think Texas is trying to broaden their horizons on the defensive line look at the moment. Ukpono is a tremendous talent, one of those Denton area guys that you see play very high level of football. We've talked about so many of them: Anthony Hill, Austin Jordan, Jatavian Sanders, Billy Bowman up north, another one. So we'll see just what happens with Xavier Ukpono. No official visit locked in at the moment for Texas.
All right, there you go. Good stuff from CJ. Thank you guys for the questions. Before we get out of here, one more shout out to our wonderful sponsor, Andy Ludicky. If you're stuck in the corporate rat race with 2 weeks PTO and no control over the money you can make or your schedule in general, you need to call Andy. He will take you through a process to help find a business that will fit your skill set and financial goals. Franchise ownership isn't for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your destiny, don't wait. Call Andy today or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. That's andy@myperfectfranchise.net. So thank you to Andy Ludicky for all of his wonderful support and his support of our Wednesday night live stream. All right, I believe we are probably close to ending the festivities here. Do you have any closing comments for the people, CJ? And I do believe tomorrow we got coffee and football. Well, me and Coach will be recording Football Theory. We have the winning drive also tomorrow from 4:15 to about 5:30. Don't forget about that. So you want to check in on On Texas Football YouTube platform or go to OnTexasFootball.com to catch up with all the great work CJ, Bobby, Jerry Hamilton are doing. Any closing statements for the people, CJ?
No, tomorrow, practice number 8. Officially the midway point of spring football. There'll be some player availabilities afterwards, so some fun updates. I'll be releasing mock draft 2.0 for the Texas Longhorns. We'll have that up on the board early tomorrow morning as well. So come in, stay tuned, and obviously stick around for the winning drive later Thursday afternoon.
As you know this very well, CJ, I'm a mock slut. I will look at anybody's mock draft. Doesn't matter who they are. So I will be consuming the mock draft. I can't wait. I'll be waiting with bated breath. Hey, thank all you guys so much for all your participation and the questions. We consider you guys to be family on Texas football as a community. So thank you guys so much, man. We love doing this and love talking to you guys about Texas football. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. None of this will be possible without Matthew behind the scenes. He does a great job. He's the real MVP. Thank you to my man CJ. Thank you to Andy Ludicky as well for all of his support. And yes, Rod Moxley Favors and CJ Red Flag Vogel. All right, for both of us. Until next time, thank you guys for all the fun and thank you guys for all your participation and all the questions. But until next time, we'll talk to you guys on the other side and hook 'em.